Hey, everybody. It is Saturday, and we're back with you again. Super excited for those of you that are tuning in. Again, happy to have you, Jesse. Super excited about the guests that we have on today's show. We are one short right now. And so if Willie shows up, we'll invite him into the broadcast. But I'm very honored that we have Trini Trinidad and Jen Comley with us today. And I'm going to pause because Willie just showed up. There he is. All right. You're good, man. Better 30 seconds late than never. I love it. Anyway, so now Willie Ning as well. And so we're going to talk a little bit about each one of these and their story and why we put this one together. But again, everything that Jesse and I do really comes back to having a resilient mindset, a positive mindset. And these three individuals are living embodiments of that. And so real quick, though, before we do introductions, I just want to take a second and give a quick little shout out to a good friend of ours. Francesca Rosales is actually in the hospital right now. She just had a double mastectomy yesterday. She's my golfing buddy. We actually work very closely with her partner, Larissa Palacios. So we love you both. We're praying for you. I'd ask anyone that believes in whatever you believe in to just pull for, root for. She has got an incredible mindset going into this, but for any, we're with you. We love you, and wishing a speedy recovery for you. So like I mentioned, super excited to have these individuals on the show. First, I'm going to talk about Trini, and this guy has been an incredible mentor of ours, a friend of ours. He's got over 23 years of experience with the San Antonio Police Department, retired as a detective, was on special operation teams as an operator, but he's been a longtime entrepreneur as well. And part of his journey in entrepreneurship really has been focused on philanthropy and giving back and helping those that are underserved. And so we're just incredibly excited to be along his side in anything that he does and to partner with him. And we're actually partnering on some pretty exciting stuff going forward. And just the last really 6-9 months, we've kind of come together and we've been meeting and chatting and sharing ideas and really supporting each other. But as you see in today's title of Winning Mindset Post-Diagnosis, they all have one thing, well, I'm sure more than one thing, but they all have something in common, and that is that they were all given a cancer diagnosis. And I'm going to let them elaborate on that. But Trini received that news, and I'm going to let him share his story because it's incredibly powerful about the odds and the things he's facing and how that's kind of shaped his life. But really, that's what we're talking about today is, when we talk about the mindset, especially, I'm a firm believer in all things Stoicism, and there's a great quote that I actually have framed, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later, but it's from Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. And he says that the happiness of our lives depends on the quality of our thoughts. And it's super important anytime we're going through anything troubling that we consider the direction or the energy of our thoughts. So anyway, we'll talk more about him specifically here in a second. And Jesse, why don't you introduce the other two, please?
Switch there. Sorry about that. Gotcha. I'm proud to talk about these two individuals. I'll start with Willie. So Willie, I have just seen this man pretty much everywhere all the time, doing all kinds of things. He has been a mentor of mine for some time. I consider him a born natural leader. He is an entrepreneur, a statesman, and also a philanthropist. So he runs a company called Blue Armor Security Services. And I mean, you've seen their work all over the city, dealing with major federal contracts to things within the local business world. He was with the department for several years, and he did a lot of amazing things in the police work world itself. So he did everything from police work itself. He was part of the U.S. Secret Service. He did all kinds of investigations, handled all kinds of things, and he gets out, retires, and then was very high in the Bexar County District Attorney's Office. He was their chief criminal investigator and their top admin person. He's just done all kinds of things in the criminal justice realm. And in addition to his public service, he's also very involved in the community. So he's part of the board of director for CASA, which is the Child Advocates of San Antonio. I know he's done things with the Hispanic Chamber. He's just everywhere. And on top of that, he's also an academic. So the guy's working on his PhD in leadership, mind you. So very, very cool guy. And I mean, he's always doing good things. He's always speaking to groups, just sharing knowledge, inspiring people. And like Joe said, they all have this thing in common, and he's a survivor, right? And he's very, very open about his faith, about his perspective on life. So I'm honored to have him here. He's a fantastic man, and anytime I've needed anything, he's been there to answer my questions or just take a look at things. So I value his friendship and his leadership. Thanks for being with us. And next we have Jen. Jen Conley is one of my absolute favorite human beings, and I mean that completely. As difficult as this is going to be to believe, her external beauty is only surpassed by the beauty of her soul. She's a giving person. She's one of the most adored people I've ever met. People are just drawn to her, and why? And that's because she's just good. It's a simple word, but like she embodies it. She transforms lives, and she's always put her heart and soul into helping people. She's transformed people for the better. I've seen her change lives, and she primarily does that through a kind of like a runner's social group / training program, which is like, it's become a San Antonio runners icon, and it's called Pure Fit San Antonio. I met her. She's a personal friend. I met her about maybe 13 years ago now, maybe 14. She advanced through the securities and financial world while raising a family and always helping people discover versions of herself. She's been a very open advocate for women and breast cancer awareness. And I'll let her get into that. But I'm proud to know her. My wife loves her. I think there's actually more pictures of her in her house and her own family. But she's ran multiple races. I want to make sure I get this right. She's ran the New York City Marathon twice, once pre-diagnosis, one 6 months after aggressive chemotherapy. She runs the Austin half marathon yearly. She recently ran the Chicago full. That was last year. And she grinded through it. Even though her body was telling her no, she didn't let up, and she finished it. I mean, I'll let her talk about it, but I'm sure it was a grueling experience that not many people can even imagine. But I'm glad to have them on the show. So thanks for being with us, guys.
Hey, Jesse, you saying that makes me realize I need to ask Trini and Willie for some pictures so I can frame them and put them in my house, because I think they're beautiful people too. But anyway, Trini, let's go with you, man. So whatever you're willing to share, and again, you know, specifically what we're talking about is you were all given that like terrible thing that from a doctor of you have cancer, right? You've all heard that, and just personally, I have never heard that, but I did lose my father to cancer at 53, just a handful of years ago. And it was quick. He went from like, hey, you have cancer, to just several months later, he was dead. And so I am really affected by this. And so I just would like for you to explain or share your journey on that, please.
Yeah, no problem. Well, first off, of course, I'm very happy to be here and very honored to be a part of your show. I know who you guys are personally. If you don't know who these guys are and what they do, you can tune into the Crisis Cops. It's on, I think HBO right now is allowing it to, who is it that's giving the free?
YouTube. So it's on
viewing.
YouTube
YouTube
today and tomorrow only. Yeah. Monday it's back to HBO, but yeah. It's free on YouTube.
If you realize what these guys do, what I love is that everything you described about Willie, Jen, myself, you guys are included in all of that. And, you know, it's wonderful things that you guys are doing. So thank you very much for that. That mental health is huge. Hey, a couple of things is Willie's got this, man, I need to work out a little bit more. I see Willie on the screen, man, and I'm bless it, dude. The guy's amazing, man.
Dude looks like an actor, right? Like he looks like
dude,
a movie
I'm
star.
telling you, man. He is like, he really could be a movie star with no problems at all. Surprised somebody hasn't picked him up yet. But hey, no, I love the concentration on the mental aspect of being diagnosed with cancer. I think it's very important to realize that, you know, like for me, when I got my first diagnosis, I knew that the way I handle myself during this most difficult challenge in my life was going to be very important, especially for my children. That was the number one thing I thought about, was how am I going to handle myself? I've been training them all their lives to handle adversity. I've handled a lot of adversity in my life, and this was by far going to be the biggest challenge. And so the mental aspect of when you get a diagnosis is extremely important. And I think that comes from a great foundation. I'm not talking about necessarily, you know, a family foundation, but just a understanding how your mind works and how it processes information when you receive, you know, news such as a diagnosis. I think that's very important. For me, showing my children how I'm going to handle this was so important because of all the training that I had done with them. And so here we are, you know, getting our first diagnosis, and it helped me a lot, you know, having something to be like a leader in, and this was going to be it. You know, how am I going to handle myself? So that was important for me.
Thanks, Trini. What about you, Jen? Tell us about your, I guess, how you got diagnosed, how you found out, and what that was like.
So I totally agree with Trini. Thank you guys so much for allowing us to discuss this, the mental aspect of cancer. There isn't enough help out there. There probably is, but not the resources to find it. And I know the first time I was diagnosed, I did myself a disservice by not really reaching out and thinking I could conquer it alone. I felt it was like a little hiccup in life. And I think that's actually the way I addressed it when I told people, it's just a little hiccup. It's nothing, you know, and I convinced myself of that, but you really do have to dig deep and really figure yourself out before you can explain that to somebody else. The first time I was diagnosed was actually after a run. I felt a lump just messing with my sports bra or something. The first time was early stage breast cancer. I had a bilateral mastectomy and reconstruction. Within a year, I actually randomly fainted at home and in the hospitals when another lump in my neck was found. And then I was diagnosed with stage 4. That was a completely different diagnosis. The first time I handled it well. I even think I went to the gym right afterwards and went on with my life. The second time was very different because things went really fast. I don't think I had a lot of time to really think about it. It was diagnosis, okay, some scans, let's get your port put in, and then straight into chemotherapy from there. Faith, I think, was the number one thing that kept me positive. I really, really genuinely have always felt that it doesn't matter the time you're here on earth, we have a purpose. And it's not necessarily, I don't need to know what the plan is. God doesn't need to explain anything to me. I'm here, I have a purpose, and I just need to leave this place better than I found it. So that has been my motto the whole time. That's
incredible. And I really want to dive into what both of you guys are saying with mindset, but I just want this audience to be familiar with your diagnosis and that beginning journey, because I really want to dive into that, because you guys both have started a great conversation with that. What about you, Willie? How did you find out, and what was that like?
Well, I had found a lump in my neck in November, I believe it was 2016, I believe it was at the end of 2016. And I remember going to the doctor several times, letting them know, hey, I've got this lump in the side of my neck. And the doctor did the blood work and said, hey, your blood work's fine. You have energy, you know, you're not losing weight, you're okay. And he gave me some antibiotics, and I do press into my faith quite a bit, and I just didn't have any peace about that. So I took the medication and I went back again in December, and it said, hey, this lump's still here. Blood work's still fine. He says, you're fine. Your body's just probably fighting something. You probably got a cold or something. And I said, I don't feel like I have a cold or a flu. He dismissed it again, and I kept being persistent. And then remember January now of 2017, I went back again and said, look, we need to find out what's going on. I said, I know I feel fine, but there's something going on here. He did an ultrasound, and later on he did a CT scan and said, hey, it looks like a fatty tissue. You're fine. We can cut it out if you want. I didn't have any peace about that. My mother had cancer and my sister had cancer, and I understand, and they had breast cancer, and I understand the importance of not having surgery and opening yourself up, because it is cancer and they're not prepared to cut it out, then it can spread once oxygen or air hits it. So I said, no, I want, what can we do? And he goes, well, we can do a biopsy. I said, well, let's do the biopsy. So we did the biopsy at the end of January of 2017, and February 3rd of 2017 is when they called me into the office to say you have stage 4 head and neck cancer. I'll be honest with you, as you guys know, being in law enforcement, you have that Superman attitude, where you're unstoppable. You run into doors, kick doors down, and run in there and catch the bad guys. It really floored me. It was something that I wasn't prepared to hear. I went alone to the doctor's office because I really didn't think anything was going to be bad to hear. So I went by myself, which I shouldn't have done. But it really floored me. The first question I asked, looking up to God, is why me? What did I do wrong? And that lasted for a little bit of a while. And then finally I said, okay, stop asking why and what. What do we need to do to kick its butt? What do I need to do to live? Chemo, radiation, surgery. I'm just like, what do we need to do? So it was very difficult for me. But again, with my faith, with family, I was able to get through that, the treatments.
Yeah. Thank you all for sharing. And I heard with Trini, and I'm not sure about yours, Willie, but with Jen as well, that you said my first diagnosis. So I imagine you hear the diagnosis, you process it, how you process it. And then when you think you're maybe on the other side of it, it comes back. And so Trini, did that happen? And what were you told the second time? And was it the same thing or was it different?
Yeah, I'm in this first go around, I missed explaining how it came about. Went in because I had a pain on my left, just under my left rib. I had a pain, and I was used to, I do a lot of punching, kicking, things of that sort. And I'd strained that area before, but it was New Year's Eve, January of 2016, and that pain just would not go away. So the next day I made an appointment. It was like 3 days out, and I couldn't handle it, man. It was kicking in pretty good. So then I went to the doctor, and that same thing, man. They called me. I'm on the road to go meet my family at Chick-fil-A, and he gives me a call, and he's not supposed to call me. I think I have my scan on like Tuesday. He's supposed to call me on Friday, and he calls me on Wednesday, and I'm like, I already knew, and he said, hey, would you mind pulling over? And I said, I'm good, doc. I mean, I get it. I know you're calling me, and it's, it's not until Friday I'm supposed to see you. So what do you got? He's like, no, I really think you need to pull over. So I pulled over, called my wife and said, hey, look, doctor's calling, I'm going to pull over. I'll be there shortly. And so that's when he told me that I had kidney cancer, and didn't know that it was like the size of a small, cantaloupe is the way they described it. I was very fortunate because in kidney cancer, you normally don't have any signs. It's usually either picked up by you're looking for something else and then the scan shows up. But on this one, I was just very fortunate that I had this pain, and I was pushing on things that were causing me pain. So went in, and they removed my left kidney. And so now we're about a year later, go through enough scans and feel pretty good, and didn't spread. So I was really happy about that. And so going into what you're asking now about the second diagnosis, it felt pretty good, but I knew that the odds were, I believe, 46% chance that I could not have a relapse. And but it happened. So again, January 2018, we get the call, and that it's back, but this time it's in my lungs. So now we're talking about the second one. you know, that mindset on the first one, like Jen was talking about, and Willie, it's, you know, it's weird because when you get it, knowing that, you know, I had already had a mindset before going into this with all the different critical situations I was involved in. It had kind of been training me to be able to accept things like, all right, this is happening. And so if I can't change this, I need to be one with it. And that's what I think got me through that first one. Through the second one, it was a little more difficult because I knew that if I got kidney cancer a second time, the odds that the American Cancer Society gives me is less than an 8% chance to live past 5 years. And so I'm 2 years and 4 months into that. Now, what's important for me is to make sure that I'm my own statistic. That's the biggest thing that I'm trying to do now is try to show like kind of like that finish line of 5 years, and then start that count up. Like, all right, let's see what I can do with this, man. Let me change. Let me put some new odds into this statistic that they got, and let me put some hope for people. And that's what's helping me now. I've always felt like a person who loves to serve, right? In the military, police officer, you know, my nonprofit, I love service. And so I was very fortunate the second time around because it really defined my why for living. And a lot of people, from what I gather and research, they don't really understand their why when they're alive. And after my 2018 diagnosis, it really sunk in like, man, you know what? I want to continue to serve and serve now even more, because when I went in on my second bout, it was in my lungs pushing up against the main artery. And the big thing was the doctors at MD Anderson are telling me, hey, look, we can't do surgery. You know, more than likely, you're not going to survive it. So all we really have are experimental drugs. Then I had a doctor here in San Antonio. He was telling me we can't do surgery and radiation doesn't work for kidney cancer. You know, so, you know, I'm sorry, chemotherapy. Our only hope would be radiation. So I have MD Anderson saying, I don't think radiation is going to work. And I got the doctor here in San Antonio saying, I think we can do it. And that was important to go with my heart. And I went with my heart on that one. And I went with the doctor here in San Antonio. Thankfully, I'm very happy to say that radiation worked. And right now there's no sign, of any type of a tumor. So I'm in a very great place right now. And that's the one thing that the second diagnosis has done for me, is it's allowed me to understand my why, and it's allowed me to live life more intently, with more intensity. That's the way I like to put it. I'm
That's
here in
awesome,
Colorado.
man.
I'm here in Salt Lake City, man, and I'm looking out at this view, and it's unbelievable. I just love the green of the grass, the blue of the sky, and man, that's what's really been intense, is living more intently.
I love that. So all of you have this incredible story that, you got frightening news, and then even after that, you guys are still doing amazing things. Like, just your perspective on life is important. That's what I really want to dive into now. And I think that's what I really want to get from this, because we talk about mental wellness and resiliency, right? I know people that, and I was one of them before, right? I would freak out at the littlest things or get upset. People do it all the time, right? Traffic, family issues, whatever. But we're talking about life altering events, and you guys have really pushed yourselves in a way not only to fight and stay alive and beat this thing and be well, but you're also making wonderful use of your time to make the world a better place, which is incredible. And I really want to talk about, before we get into the perspective, I want to talk about the fight. And all of you guys, I consider badasses. You guys are fighters, and I think you have that innate thing about you. You grind things out, and I wonder if that helped you with this. And I've also heard, and I'm completely ignorant to this, and I know a lot of our viewers are, I've heard that the treatment is sometimes worse than the disease, right? Or the illness. Like, there's side effects and it's scary, whatever. So I'd like to hear about your fight and what that's like. If you're still going through that treatment, how it's affected you, your family, Jen.
So with stage 4 breast cancer, it's not curable, but it's treatable. So you always stay in treatment, and the goal is to hope that the medications work. You go through different lines of therapy, hope that they work until either they stop working, all medications stop working, and you can make that decision to go into clinical trials or not, or there's a cure. So currently I have infusions of a targeted therapy and a chemotherapy every 21 days. And I'm on my third medication because eventually the medications stop working. I have one more before I would have to start clinical trials. But it's a constant fight. And it's so funny that you had mentioned being a fighter. I remember after my second diagnosis, you keep hearing that, keep fighting. And eventually it's like, I'm trying. And I almost got tired of the word fight. And it really took a while for me to realize the fight, I'm not fighting against the disease. I'm fighting for time. I'm fighting for time with my family. I'm fighting for time to leave an imprint on this world, and so now I'm more accepting of the word fight. And maybe that was a part of it. And that kind of leads me to the fact that I don't want anyone to feel that because we're saying, we were diagnosed with cancer and we're doing all of these amazing things and, that life is great. It's not, you can't stay positive all of the time. I mean, it's just like in the gym, you're not motivated every day. You will have moments and you should allow yourself to have those moments. And that was one of the hardest lessons was to learn it was okay not to be okay. You hold everything in, and especially when you have kids, you don't want them to, you want to take the pain. You don't want them to feel that pain. And so you're constantly painting a smile on your face, but it's okay. And I had to learn, especially now that I have teenagers, I have to teach them to cope also. That, sometimes there are going to be days where you're down, you're really, really down, but there's tomorrow or there's the next hour or whatever. And then you have to change your mindset and not stay down in the dumps too long.
I love that. And it reminds me of something that Simon Sinek says, right? So in all of this that we're going through, like the COVID-19, all of that, he brought up a point that, there's a difference between a positive mindset and resiliency, right? Positivity all the time is unrealistic, right? And it's almost, it's an impossibility and it isn't a real thing. And that's why I think people kind of shy away from it or don't like saying it, or maybe they scoff at it. But resilience is just that, right? The push through. That you're not feeling well right now, but you're grabbing on the hope and you're using that. So I really appreciate you sharing that perspective, Jen. I think that's going to resonate with a lot of people. What about you, Willie?
Well, first I'll answer really quickly. I saw, I guess, a viewer is asking a question of how I dealt with, I guess, the rage or anger to the doctor. And, I really didn't have any, to be honest with you. I see doctors as humans that make mistakes, just like lawyers and just like police officers and everyone else. They make a mistake. They're human. They're wrapped in flesh. And unfortunately, some doctors look at symptoms as a menu, right? This is one symptom you're having. This is a symptom, so it must be this. And sometimes doctors, just like everyone else, needs to think outside the box and go that extra mile. And I am fortunate and blessed that I was as aggressive as I was, because had I not been, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be having this interview right now. The type of cancer I had typically goes straight to the brain and goes to the lungs. And that was one of the questions they asked me: do you have any headaches, or do you have shortness of breath? Because that's what's known for this cancer to do. So I wasn't upset at all. I did talk to the doctors afterwards, though, and you learn from your experiences, and I hope that they learn from their experience and from my experience, so that they just go that extra mile and not get complacent when they're looking at symptoms. I've always said that also. I'm the type of person that doesn't like to hang around in the symptoms of issues. And we do that all the time, right? You have a cough, you go to Walgreens, you buy cough medicine. Well, all that does is suppress the symptom. We want to know what's causing the cough, and let's be aggressive to that. Now, switching gears on the treatment was very difficult for me. I had radiation every day for almost 2 months in my neck area, and I had chemo at the same time. They did it at the same time. They felt that I was young and strong enough to handle both types of treatment at the same time, so I did that. I made it harder for myself. I didn't want anything foreign in my body, so I didn't want a port, and I didn't want a feeding tube. And the doctors didn't push me, and they said, okay, if you don't want it, that's fine. The problem is that when I got so much radiation in my neck, my esophagus was so swollen that I couldn't eat after a while. I wasn't warned on that. They didn't explain that in detail to me. But so for 5 weeks straight, I couldn't eat anything at all. 2 weeks at the end of the radiation, my esophagus was so swollen that I couldn't even drink water because it was going into my airways. Even water was too thick to go down my esophagus. So then I was becoming dehydrated. So at that point, I was having to go to the hospital every other day for IV hydration. Well, I was dehydrated. And what happens when you're dehydrated, if you don't know, your veins collapse. So now I didn't have a port. So I'm going every other day and they're sticking me all over. Sometimes they're sticking me in my bicep. Sometimes they're sticking me further down my forearm, areas that they don't typically give IVs, but they were having to do with me. So my experience was very difficult. And you're right. There was times where I sat on the sofa and wondered, can I get through this? Not being able to eat, starting treatment at weighing about 215 pounds. And now I'm dwindling down to 165 pounds. I'm weak. I'm not going in public because I don't want my family and friends to see me and they get worried looking at my condition. It was very difficult. At some point, I was even questioning doctors, like, how do you know it takes this much chemo? How do you know it takes this much radiation? How do you know we're not done already and we can stop now? Because I was tired of it. But with family, my wife, and my faith and everything else, I kept pushing. And that has led me now to live a purpose-driven life. And I keep telling people, I'm not position-driven, I promise you. Trini and I are a lot of alike. He's got his business and a nonprofit. When I was going through treatment, I started a nonprofit. I figured, what can I do good from this situation? And so I created a nonprofit that helps cancer patients, in particular first responders as well. They're going through cancer, helping with mortgage payment or car payment, something, groceries, whatever I can't help. And Jen said, also that you have your weak moments. And Trini and I have known each other for years through the department, but we were never really close. But we started reaching out to each other. And, it helps when Trini is having a weak moment, he'd call me, or sometimes he would just text me. If I'm having a weak moment, I would just call or I would text him. And it's just good to know that what you're feeling, that weakness is kind of normal when you're going through this battle. And even after, right, it continues to be a spiritual battle. Where you're wondering, you feel something, what's that feeling? And you start to stress out. And so Trini and I would talk, we would text, hey brother, I'm feeling this, man. Oh, it could be this. And we would talk to each other almost as you're negotiating each other, like a negotiator, right? You're kind of talking each other down off that stressful thought process that you're having. So it was a tough journey going through the treatment. But I think that with this, like the conversations we're having, to let people know, I see Jen's post often, and it inspires all of us that have gone through it to see that she's in that fight and she's continuing on. And as she mentioned, the fight is different now, right? It's shifting to her having time here on earth. And the reality is that's for all of us. That's the reality of it. We were all police officers at one time. And how many times did you go to a vehicle accident and somebody dies suddenly? That person didn't have an opportunity to make things right. That person didn't have an opportunity to say to the loved ones they love them and to make their life better and to live their life purposeful. I've had people tell me, going through cancer, Willie, that's a blessing to you. And I was like, how is that a blessing? Well, now I see it, because now I can make sure that I live my life purposeful every day. And you see that in Jen, and you see that in Trini, and you see that in a lot of people who have gone through this journey.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I won't compare an injury to cancer, but the point is, my brother-in-law just 2 days ago, just moving a box at his house back in Iowa, went through the box in a vase, cut his wrist, cut the artery, the tendon, the nerve, and lost like 5 pints of blood, had to be airlifted, nearly died from it. But he said when he was in the helicopter, he was looking at the flight nurse, clearly in shock, but he said, "What is the purpose of life?" And she was like, "Oh, this isn't good." But he said he remembers her response, and it was, it's to smile, it's to laugh, it's to have fun, it's to enjoy it. And there's so much, and I don't want to make this about current events right now, but I also don't want to avoid it with our head in the sand, because again, one of the things about me is I really struggle with having a filter. So I try and be as tactful as possible when I say things, but people are struggling right now. And and so whether it's an injury, an illness, a pandemic, COVID, the incident with George Floyd, I'll say his name, in Minneapolis, there's so much happening in our country that sadly I feel like divides us so much. And it's like you're forced into choosing one of these camps. But I think it's so important that we keep perspective in our own life and remember like the simplest truth of what is the purpose of all this. And you guys are all touching on it. And I think to the point that Willie was making, when someone says, "Hey, this is a blessing for you," and to my brother-in-law Shane, when he was saying like, you know what, maybe this was a message for me. Like maybe this is a reminder that I've got to slow down. Like I actually have to stop and appreciate what's around me, because we live, I've said this for years now, but we are habitual beings that are addicted to distractions, and we live our lives constantly focused on the external world of what's around us, whether we're trying to achieve or strive for something, or we're goal-oriented people, which is great. But how much time do we spend internally doing the work right where we are? And so I want to transition from the point I'm making into your own journey of self-care. Whether it was, again, right after I understand that you guys are saying the struggle was very real, and there was bad moments, but what we know about all three of you is that you continued to push through. And so if there's just one or two things that you could share, like practical tips for maintaining that positive mindset. And I wrote a couple down preparing for this show, but one of the things I want to bring up, because you guys have been touching on it, is one, I'm a firm believer in gratitude, having a gratitude practice, gratitude journal. But what you were all talking about really is having that support group or that support system. Did you find yourselves, so two questions, what are your self-care practices to develop that positive mindset? And then two is, did you find yourselves not necessarily shutting people out, but maybe turning away from people because they looked at you differently or treated you differently because of what you're going through? And anyone can jump on.
I think we're all being polite. Talk first. I don't think I shut anyone out. Your perspective does change, where when you're living that, like what Willie said, this life of purpose, you start to really identify who you have in your life and if it added value to your life or whether you were adding value to their life. Something I think that people don't really like to talk about is, you have like this almost, I don't want to say fake banter, but it kind of is. And when someone's asking you, how do you feel? Sometimes you're not sure if they really care how you feel or if they're just asking just to ask. So I've kind of had to learn what answers to give. Do I just totally vomit what I'm feeling that day? Or do I just give them the answer that they want and move on with my life and make, do something that's going to have some purpose in it? As far as self-care, running was a lot of my life. It got me through a difficult divorce many, many years ago. That's actually how I started running, and how I started the running group was to share, what it gave me. It's been very difficult as my body has changed, and with chemotherapy and all of someone touched on that, the side effects of the medications, to the point where right now I can't even run a quarter mile without struggling. Even though it's difficult at the time, I still continue to try to do it because it makes me feel good afterwards. For me, that is part of self-care, is just to get back out there and even have a little glimpse of who I used to be. There are definitely times that I get down because I can't do the things that I used to do, but I'm still out there. and it gives me the sense of, satisfaction at the end. Everything, I don't really think that I have, you know what? I lie. Someone invited me to a mindful meditation, and is a good friend of mine, and she's so supportive of me. And at first, I'll be honest, I was like, oh God, not this hippie stuff, really? But she was always supportive of me, so I went to support her. And honestly, I walked away having learned what I needed to learn. I got out of that. It was a message for me. I talked to a friend of mine that was also there, and she received a different message that was meant for her. But it reminded me to simplify things. I'm here right now. Anywhere you're at, whether you're at dinner, we talk about putting your phone away and actually being present. It's those things that are that I learned from that. I don't need to think about that scan I have coming up next week or what the doctor said yesterday. If I'm sitting in front of you, I want to hear what you have to say. I want to be there. And an example of that was just the other day. It was my daughter's birthday. And I'm not going to lie, there are moments, Christmases, any kind of big moment, baby showers, that I think, will I be here for the next one? There's, will I be here for her next birthday? And I know that it crosses their mind too, but I couldn't stay there too long. I need to move on. I'm here now. Let's celebrate your birthday now because I'm here for this one now. And that mindful meditation, it's a practice. I have to remind myself of what I learned that day all the time. And I actually have little reminders around my house, whether it be a bowl that I put fruit in on my table that says simplify, or the cutesy little things you put on your walls that remind you, hey, compliment someone today, or whatever. Those things for me are kind of the way I cope and part of my own self-care.
And if I can just comment on that, Jen, I love everything that you're saying. And this is what's so wonderful about being in a group that of people. I mean, if I meet somebody who has had cancer, it's instantly I feel a connection. Instantly I feel like, okay, you get me. You understand. That's why the conversations with Willie were so important, because it was okay to show that weakness. It was okay to show that fear. Yes, you get a pain and you're wondering, is it coming back? You get a scan because they're saying, hey, we need you to get another one. We didn't get such a good look. And you start wondering, damn, is there something there? And if you don't have somebody that has been there and done that, if you will, it's very difficult, because like Jen said, there are people who will make comments and they're great. Their intent is really good. They'll say like, well, hey, look, my uncle, beat cancer and he's had it twice or something like that. But a lot of people don't realize different cancers, it doesn't go across the board. I mean, the different cancers have different treatments, different odds, things of that sort. So you take those comments and you go, you know what, you switch it when somebody says something and you're like, they're just coming from a great place. And so you're able to accept that. But when you speak to somebody who's had cancer, it just makes a world of a difference. So making sure you choose the right people, though, because some people will have a mentality that sometimes just doesn't jive well with what you're trying to do in your stage of your journey with cancer. And me and Willie, we hit it off really well, because we were we already knew that we had done the cool stuff as far as like, kicking doors and doing all that. Like, we knew that we already had that out of the way. We could just be real with each other. And that's what I love, finding somebody that you can express yourself to. Because like Jen, to your point, about 3 days ago, I'm on a trip. We've been gone for about a week. And about 3 days ago, man, my daughter sang on the balcony of this beautiful mountain background with snow and all. And she sang a song, man, and it just made me think, holy smokes. In 2016, I was saying, just let me get my daughter out of the house. Let me teach her a little bit more. Let me get my son where he needs to be. That's what I need. And then boom, all of a sudden you're going, holy smokes, she's about to go to college. And that roller coaster of emotions that you have to deal with, they get you. And I started crying. That was 3 days ago. And, but I'm very open with my family, and that helps a lot, because I'm very vulnerable with them. They've seen me do all the type A personality stuff. And it's important to show them, look, it's okay to feel weak at times. It's okay to feel, sad, but it's how you handle it. Recognize you're in that mode, recognize you're in that mindset, and then go, all right, But what do I have to be thankful for? Shoot, man, I have another day. I get to go be with my family, you know, and all of a sudden you try to get yourself out. But there are those days that I lay in bed sometimes and I just want to throw the cover over my head and just lay there for a little while. And that's the part where Jen and Willie, I know we connect with, where it's okay to do that sometimes. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean, you know, as far as like you're missing or you're something that no, man, it's lay there, do that, go through it. And then once you get that crying out, once you get all that out, then get up and get on with your day. My big thing is, what's intensified for me is I don't want to be around anyone I don't want to be around. Like I want to if I wake up in the day, I go, is this what I want to do if this was my last day on earth? And I start checking myself and start realizing, yep, this is what I want to do. And I'm happy with my day. And I make sure that when that sun is setting that I'm going, yep, that was a good day, you know, and keep pushing on like that.
It's so funny because whenever Michelle found out that this is what the show is going to be about, and that particularly you, Jen, were on it, she's like, "You prepared to cry?" And I said, "That's not going to happen." And here I am, freaking getting all weepy-eyed. You guys are, I think, what you guys are showing us all is how we should live, right? How to practice our lives. And Trini, that's awesome, and I'm glad you're experiencing that beautiful moment. You deserve all your successes, bro. You really do. Jen, you say something that's important, right? So your little segment could be like a synopsis of what Joe and I teach. But the most important thing that you're talking about is what we refer to as micro actions. So it's Joe and I can teach people things. We can go up and talk and give this information out. But what we found challenging is for people to like incorporate it. And the easiest way for that to happen is to start doing these little things every day. And you're doing those, right? You listed all these little actions. If you do that a day, like you're adapting your behavior to living your life that way. So I think that's really cool that you reminded me of that. It's interesting though, like this is off topic, but Joe and I are actually like figuring out technology so that we can do that for organizations. So after we teach you this, we're going to be pushing you microtransactions, and that's exactly what you're doing, Jen. Thanks for bringing that up. Willie, what did you have to add, brother?
Well, I think that that self-care part of it, y'all were talking about, I think that how I deal with that is doing what we're doing now. You know, even if it's not a conversation, you know, I think it's important for us to post the things that we do. For example, I do post every time the anniversary comes up of a year of being cancer-free. I think it's important. So many people that are going through the battle see that, and it's an encouragement to them. You know, it's important to know, for me to actually type it, I had stage 4. Now, I will tell people this, is that if you do receive that horrible news, don't focus on that number. And it's my opinion, because that number already, some people, depending on how strong you are mentally, you'll be defeated. And I've also talked to the doctors about that. I said, look, you know, why don't you give the diagnosis and say that stage 1 time and then don't say it anymore? Because each time you say it over and over again, you could be defeating that person's emotionally and mentally, and their family as well. Because when I heard the 4, the first thing I asked is, how much time do I have? But, you know, I think it's important for us that have gone through that battle to have the conversation with each other, to encourage each other, and also to encourage others, whether they're in the storm at the time or in the future they get in that storm. So many people reach out to me all the time saying, hey, my sibling has cancer, can you talk to them? Or I have cancer, can you talk to them? And that's how I get through my days, is actually helping people and serving them and motivating them, inspiring them, not by my words, but by my actions. And I think that that's important for all of us to do, and it's critical for all of us to do, you know, that are either going through or had gone through it, is to help other people. This, you know, I don't think that this happened by accident. There's a reason why, and there's a reason why I'm standing before you and we're having this conversation. So I'm going to do my part and help other people. I didn't shut anybody out. You know, I've always been a person, I don't look at relationships as what am I going to gain from it? I mean, what are they going to get? You know, what am I going to gain for it? I was like, how can I help someone else? So the relationships that I've had and still have, it's not because they offer me something. It's because I feel like I offer them something. So I didn't really push anybody away. I don't focus on negative things much. I don't like going back and forth on social media or arguing with people. It's just, to me, it's just, I respect that we can agree to disagree. And all of us are who we are based on our experiences. And so I can't tell someone they're wrong for their opinion of things because I didn't walk in their shoes to that wisdom and knowledge to create that perception or opinion. So I don't question them at all about that stuff. And, of course, recently, running for office, I try to run as positive as I can and why I was the best candidate to run and why I felt that I could improve public safety. But somebody spoke about division a while ago, as countries divided, and I agree with that. It saddens me how divided we are. It saddens me that even just a single letter behind a name, whether it's a D or whether it's an R, creates division, and it's sad. It's sad to see that because our goal and our purpose should be to help one another, regardless of your skin color, your socioeconomic status, and what political party you're affiliated with. But it's not that way right now in this country. It seems like we're pretty divided, and it saddens me quite a bit.
There's a lot to get through that, Willie. So I agree with you, right? Identity politics really, really bother me. And arguing with people on social media, like right now, these are usually times when I would get off. Like usually when stuff like this is going on, it freaking hurts my heart just to scroll through it, right? But this is our bread and butter right now. Is what Joe and I are doing, and it's tough to be around everybody and reach. So I stay on because I connect with family. But you're absolutely right, and I think you ran an awesome campaign. A lot of people believe in you, and I wouldn't. Identity politics are what they are. You're an excellent leader, and I commend you for everything you've done for the citizens of Bexar County and the citizens of San Antonio.
I second that.
You also, so we covered a lot, and you guys all are putting the puzzle together. We talked about perspective, it's okay not to be okay, mindfulness, who's in your circle, controlling negative thoughts, controlling negative interactions. You covered all these things, right? And man, this conversation could go on forever because I have so many questions. I know Joe's does too, and I'm sure our viewers do also. And I know we're giving us some we couldn't even get to. But we know your time is valuable, and we know you guys got your lives to get back to and to continue going on, changing the world for the better as you guys always have. This is something we do, Joe and I, when we close the show. We ask each of you to give a final thought. If there's something you want the world to know, to feel, something you want to leave the audience with, we'd ask you to go ahead and do that now. And again, go ahead and bring that forward, and I'll let you guys decide who wants to go first. I love putting you guys on the spot, especially people like you. So go for it.
Let's say ladies first.
I think what I would want to leave someone with is exactly kind of what I said earlier, is we all have a purpose. I hope to reach the age of 40. I hope to see my children graduate, all of those things. But what am I going to do from now until then? And also just trusting in God. You have a purpose. You don't need to know what it is. You don't need to know what the plan is. You have to find out what your purpose is and go with it, roll with it. Leave this place better than you found it. And we don't know. Again, I was fortunate enough to have this diagnosis and have some time to prepare things for my kids for after I pass, things like that. But we should live our lives every day with this purpose because we don't know when the last day is.
You're absolutely doing that, Jen. And you have transformed people's lives and you've made this world a better place. And I have no doubt that the best is yet to come. Thanks for joining us, Jen.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
I'll go next, I guess. you know, with what Jen, kind of piggybacking what Jen's talking about, for me, it's, you know, this is may seem kind of weird, but in our circle, it's not. You know, we all are going to die. That's it. You know, that's a done deal. So I try to imagine every day, and I did this before my diagnosis. So it was cool that I knew I had already practiced this beforehand, and it helped me as I went through this. And that is just realizing, okay, hey, one day it's going to end. So making sure that I'm taking in the moments. You know, I don't remember, it was like on The Office or something. They said, like, I wish somebody would tell us we're in the good old days when we're in the good old days, right? So making sure you maximize your time. That's all. Stop every once in a while and just take it all in. Really get a good snapshot of your children, your significant other, you know, your environment. You know, if you're out just hiking, just take a second. Don't worry about getting to the summit. You know, take a second to enjoy every part of that journey. And that for me is the biggest thing. In this journey of this life, this experience that we're having right now, it's very important to make sure that we value every day. So that day, you know, hey, if another diagnosis comes around, it's going to be like, all right, you know, all right, let's see what we need to do. Let's see what we need to do to get past this. But the cool part is I know I've been practicing maximizing my time. So, and taking it all in. So that to me is like the biggest thing. Make sure you enjoy your time, because one day our time's going to come, and it doesn't matter whether it's with cancer, if it's an officer that's going in to, you know, try to get a bad guy or whatever it is, our time's going to come. So just make sure you make the most of it and enjoy every moment you can.
Thank you, Trini. I invite all of you guys to subscribe to Trini's YouTube channel, follow on all social media platforms. You can get so much more from him, that he's putting out content all the time. And I'm very proud to say that there's some big things coming in the works, and it'll be a little bit more of this and then some. Oh, yeah. So thanks for joining us, Trini. You're a good friend and mentor, brother. Thanks, man.
I'm very happy that you all asked me to be here. Thank you. Great company also.
Willie.
I think what I would like for people to take away from this is, it's unfortunate that I see it all the time, is don't lose your identity. You know, so many people are trying to be other people. They want to look like somebody else, injections, surgeries. I mean, you name it. They try to emulate somebody else. No matter how hard you try to be somebody else, you're not going to be. Back to, as we've been saying this over and over again, Trini said it, Jen said it, we all have a purpose. My purpose isn't yours and yours isn't mine. And one thing I talk about when I go to schools to speak to students is this, you know, in Trini and you guys will get this, you know, we're law enforcement officers. When we go to a crime scene, we look for an evidence that can identify one person that committed that crime, right? Or a person or several people. And there's one type of evidence that leads us to a person without a doubt. And I'm not talking about video or DNA, because DNA, your siblings can have the same DNA. And that's your fingerprint. And I tell people, and I tell students, look down at your hands. If ever you don't feel you're special, if ever you don't feel like you have a purpose, look at your fingerprints. In law enforcement, we have never ran a set of fingerprints and ever said, wow, in the 1800s, this belonged to John and now it belongs to Jane. It doesn't happen. So what does that tell you? Regardless of who you believe your creator is, you have a set of fingerprints that they drew those lines. They took that time to give you those specific lines in your fingers that nobody will ever, ever, ever have again. That tells you that you're special. That tells you that you're unique. And that tells you you have a purpose. So I tell people, don't lose your identity in trying to be somebody that you're not. Be who you are. Figure what out your purpose is, and don't let anyone stop you from that. You know, as you mentioned earlier, you know, I was going through cancer. I was the chief investigator, and I was working on my PhD and running my business. And I didn't give up any of those things, because I felt that if I did, the cancer beat me, regardless if I survived or not, because I felt that was my purpose. So I have so much passion in it. And that's what drove me and continued to drive me, because I feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So if anybody can take away from my part of this, is that don't lose your identity. And if ever you have any doubt that you're special and you're unique and you have a purpose, just look at your fingerprints, because nobody will ever and has ever had those prints before.
Wow, man. I don't know how to follow up with that. thank you guys all for being with us. It was I'm very proud of the show. Very proud to be associated with all of you. You're amazing human beings. Thank you. Before I pass it to Joe for his final thought, like we always do, I just want to say I really believe that the country needs hope right now. And it's difficult for Joe and I to give, well, maybe more for me than Joe. Joe will always give his opinion on things, right? But it's very hard right now to give an honest opinion and full spectrum of what we view of the world and what's happening. And I really think that's because so many people have issues with the unsettlingness or the uncomfortability of truth. But all I'll say is, no matter what's happening in the world, we can control ourselves. We can control our thoughts. We can control who we're around. We can control what we do with our time. And you guys are examples of that. Entrepreneurs, influencers, coaches, you guys are making things happen. And I want all the viewers to really grasp and hold on to what these individuals are saying. And in all of this negative emotion, anger, hurt, and it's justified. Those feelings are real and you should have them. I just hope that we can reach for hope and unity more than anything and live our lives the best way we can. We can't control everyone else, but we can certainly control ourselves. And thank you for being examples of what hope and truth looks like. And I'll give it to you, Joe, for your final thought, brother.
Hold on, I was still muted. All right, thank you, Jesse. I love it. And to Jen and Willie and Trini, thank you so much for taking time out of your Saturday, Trini, while you're traveling in the great state of Utah. I've never been, but it looks beautiful from what you've already showed me. I can't wait to see your traveling with Trini video. But what you guys were finishing with fired me up because, again, before every show, I take some notes. I do a little outline. I think about what is something that I want to make sure we address. And you guys really navigated my outline without me having to do any of the work. So I really, really appreciate that. Jen touched on it. Willie touched on it. Trini just finished touching on it too when he was talking about your hike is not about getting to the summit. It's about appreciating the step. One of the most practical tips for a positive mindset for self-care is learning how to stay present in each moment, right? We know anxiety is really fear of a made-up future. It's a story that we've created that hasn't yet happened, and most of what we fear never happens. Depression is focused on the past. It's something that's already passed, but we're holding on to it. So the more we can learn to become truly and fully present in each moment, the better it's going to be for us. So I love that Jen said, be here now, whether you're at dinner, whether you're taking a shower, whether you're eating a meal with your family, be here now. I would add a comma to that and just say, and then work to be here tomorrow, especially if you are having to, forgive me, Jen, but fight through something or work through something. Be here now, but thrive for tomorrow. And then I'll finish with this beautiful quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, which I love. And Jen, I'm with you too. Like when it was this whole mindfulness and meditation and all that, I was like, not a chance. But it is really, really a beautiful practice when you can spend some time in it. And so it's something I still dabble in. I wouldn't say I'm a master, but I try it every now and again. But I absolutely have other practices that benefit me. But this quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, to wrap up with a point Willie was making about our individuality and our beauty, he said, to be beautiful means to be yourself. You do not need to be accepted by others. You need to accept yourself. And I think so many people are so worried about public opinion and other people's perception of them, or even if you do have a diagnosis and now you're having to go through different treatments that are shaping or transforming your body, it doesn't take away your beauty, right? Your beauty is in your self-acceptance. And so I'm just super honored to have this group. Thank you so much. Again, I appreciate everyone taking time out of their Saturday to do this with us. Jesse, thank you to the panel. I really, really appreciate it. Yours in service, all of you. I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Take care,
You're
guys.
very welcome.
Bye.
Still going to try to look like you, Willie. Still going to try.